Welcome to this week's edition of Mississippi Happenings Podcast. I'm your host, David Oles, and with me is my co-host, Mr. Jim Newman. Jim, how are you, buddy?
I'm dry, but it's been raining.
Well, that's good to know that you are dry, and I've missed you on the couple of the episodes, so it is also very good to have you back with us. Episode of the series, Religion and Politics in America Today. We had a great conversation with Hugh Hollowell last week, and we are equally excited to get this episode started as well. Joining us today is Robert S. McIlvaine. He is an historian. He is emeritus professor at Millsaps in Jackson, Mississippi. He is the author of 8 books and the editor of 3. So, Bob, it's great to have you with us today.
Glad to be with you. I was sort of surprised to hear from Jim that there's still dry counties in Mississippi, but
Gotcha. Bob is the author of one of the books that I want to talk about today because it fits into what we're doing. And it is Grand Theft Jesus. This is a book that he published in 2008. Grand Theft Jesus, the hijacking of religion in America today. And I want to read, and this is available on Amazon, a Kindle, and I think it was $5.99, and I bought it the other day, and it is a very good read. Now, I want to, Bob, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a quote and also one of the comments from the book. We're mad as heaven, and we're not going to take it anymore, declares historian Robert McIlvaine in his passionate and often hilarious rallying cry for sincere Jesus followers. He lets the rest of the society know that the extreme right wing won't be allowed to speak for all Christians any longer. And this is from 2000.
well, as a historian, I suppose I'm usually looking backward, but it seems like I was looking forward when I wrote this book in the years going up to 2008, because it's far worse now than it was then. The I refer to it as Christianity light, easy Jesus, the preachers who basically say things like Jesus will make you rich, and basically say exactly the opposite of what Jesus said. And they're getting more. And of course, you understand why people would follow this. It's a lot better than following what Jesus actually taught. Well, I think the biggest difference is that these Jesus thieves have more power than they did then. they the sorts of things they're doing, they're part of this right wing movement that's been working basically since the late 1970s to gain more and more power through the Supreme Court, eventually to get someone into the White House that they could control and use for their ends. The very term Christian nationalism goes against the whole idea of Jesus. The idea that they're going to try to turn the country into something like the Islamic Republic of Iran, the quote unquote Christian non-republic of the United States, um, put down their version of Sharia law and tell people what they can and can't do. I suppose um, the person who foresaw where this could lead best was Margaret Atwood when she wrote I think it was the late 70s or early 80s, The Handmaid's Tale about the United States being taken over by a group of right wing Christians who enforce their rules on everyone. And uh, we're not quite there today, but we're closer to it than we were when I wrote Grand Theft Jesus. Well, it's certainly Jerry Falwell was one of the founders of the more modern versions of it. There had been others going back to the 20s and so forth, but um, and then people on radio who were attracting large groups of followers. Um, but particularly using television and now other more modern means of communication, kind of did begin, I think, with Falwell and some others at that time. Well, first of all, these people argue that the United States was founded as a Christian nation, which is just 180 degrees from the truth. The people who were the principal founders, very intentionally, they were not only trying to break away from monarchy and aristocracy, but a church being related to the state and controlling things, as was the case in European nations. And so they specifically set up and put in the First Amendment to the Constitution. They had already talked about the same thing of keeping religion out of politics and politics out of religion in earlier writings. But they put it in the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, which was intended not only to protect the people from the state being used by religion, but to protect religions from the state as well. They come up with all these things of George Washington said this or that, but Jefferson, Franklin, most of the leaders, Washington himself were deists. They were part of the Enlightenment. They saw the idea that there had to be a creator, but they saw the creator as someone who set things up and more or less used science to make the universe work, and then didn't particularly intervene. Jefferson, of course, famously said that Jesus had written the greatest moral code you could imagine and wrote a version of the Bible just with Jesus giving his views on things, but taking all the supernatural things out. And saw again Jesus as a teacher and someone who should be followed. One of the things I've said for a long time, and say, if I recall correctly, several times in the book Grand Theft Jesus, is that to these modern people who steal the name of Jesus, um, the actual teachings of Jesus the lines that Jesus spoke, and in some versions of the Bible are printed in red, those red lines are unread by those people. Lo- Look at what the founders said and what the founding documents said. So specifically, they did not want religion to be mixed up with government in any way. Uh, all I can do is point to the evidence, but of course, we live, as many people say now, in a post-truth world, a post-fact world, and people just believe what they want to believe. And I saw somebody said it on Facebook or something. It's just absolutely untrue. It's not factual. Yeah, that's a big part of the problem, and something that's gotten even worse since the time I did the book. This idea, I mean, so many of these people, I came up with a term for a psychological malady, which is not yet listed by the American Psychological Association or Psychiatric Association. I call it AMID, acute masculine insecurity disorder. They're so afraid that they are not living up to real men. They're so afraid of anything that might be feminine that they overcompensate. And Whiskey Pete Hegseth is a perfect example. Trump himself. They're all afraid of. Well, Elon Musk. Let's look at Elon Musk for a moment, and how he denounces people like Mackenzie Scott and Melinda French Gates for being philanthropic towards organizations that help women, help disadvantaged people, saying they're destroying Western civilization. He said Musk said empathy is the main bug in Western civilization. Well, empathy, empathy, first of all, is what Jesus was all about, but it's basically what civilization is about. And they're just terrified that they're not real men, and they think we have to denounce anything that sounds girly, like helping people. I think that sounds like Jesus too, though. Well, definitely the Beatitudes. After all, the things that these Jesus thieves most often are demanding that people follow are being against homosexuality and against abortion. Well, I don't know whether those people have ever read the Gospels and what Jesus is recorded as having said, but he had never mentioned either one of them. That doesn't mean that he was in favor of them, but he didn't think that they were things that he needed to be focused on. I don't know. He talked several hundred times about helping the poor and such. They're not interested in that. The only thing, um, the only time that homosexuality is condemned in the Bible are a couple of times in the original Torah and Leviticus and one of those other books. And it says something like a man shall not sleep with a man as with a woman, for it's a what's the word, a something to your God, an abomination to your Lord, the God, your God. And it uses that. There's like 600 and some laws that are in the misvote, and all these things, or many of them at least, are referred to as an abomination to God. And there are things like not wearing flax and wool things together, of not planting crops next to each other. And almost nobody pays any attention to any of them, but they just pick out these one or two that this is what Jesus wants. Well, Jesus didn't want them, or at least he didn't talk about it. And he specifically said, you have been told this, you've been told that, I'm telling you something else. In other words, you were told this in the what Christians call the Old Testament, I'm telling you something else. You were told to love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I'm telling you, no, you have to love your enemy as well. So he specifically said you shouldn't be following that. And when it comes to homosexuality, it does talk about a man lying with a man as with a woman. It doesn't say anything about a woman lying with a woman. So I don't think even in the Old Testament, the idea of lesbianism isn't condemned at all. But they don't care. That's the main thing. And abortion, of course, abortion went on all the time in the ancient world. And so if Jesus thought it was really a major thing, you'd think he might have said something about it. But again, the things he did talk about are the things they don't want to hear about: helping others, being peacemakers, and all that sort of thing. I I do have in the book. I haven't looked at this in a long time, but I'm bringing it up on my screen here to read from what I had in Green Theft Jesus of uh, the Beatitudes according to the Jesus thieves. Blessed are the haughty in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who exalt over others, for they shall be further rewarded. Blessed are the arrogant, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for domination, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who show no mercy, for they shall obtain the wealth of others. Blessed are the war makers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Blessed are those who persecute for their own sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when you revile others and persecute others and utter all sorts of evil against them falsely on my account. So that's what, a sort of humorous version, perhaps, but it's basically what they think. They want you to act exactly the opposite way of what Jesus said. Well, that's interesting because again, these people are referred to as Jesus thieves have stolen the name. Um, a good friend of mine who was a Methodist minister, religious studies professor, when basically when Falwell and those people were around and claiming the name of Christianity, he finally got so exasperated he said, if that's what you mean by Christianity, don't call me a Christian. You can call me an SOB or whatever you want, but don't call me a Christian if people are going to think that I'm like them. So, what I would sometimes would refer to myself as is a Jesus follower, or at least somebody who tries, not successfully all the time, but to follow what Jesus said. But Christianity has it's become meaning something almost the opposite of what it should. And in fact, I also talk in that book and one other one about how when Christianity was developing, and you get along in the Roman Empire, you get to the time of Constantine in the early 300s, and he at that time Christianity is becoming more popular, and the empire is being divided, and there's different people claiming to be emperor fighting over it. And at the critical battle the night before the Battle of Milvan Bridge in 312, if I remember, um, he supposedly gets a message from God, comes to him saying, paint this insignia of a cross on the shields of your soldiers and you will win. And he did. So he did not convert to Christianity at that point. He didn't until his deathbed, but he started to favor Christianity. But he's favoring a Christianity that's the opposite of what Jesus taught. And so I think most people who call themselves Christians today, that is the people who are basically twisting the teachings of Jesus to their opposite, would more accurately be called Constantinians. You will go out and be able to kill people in war if you follow Jesus. You're welcome to it. No, I was just saying you're welcome to it. Go ahead and steal it. No, no, that's all right. Well, in some ways, I think the people who are doing that are self-destructive. They have gone so far. I mean, they developed this plan, and most of it was put into Project 2025, which most people didn't know much about what was in it, but what little they heard during 2024 and the months leading up to the election, they didn't like any of it. It had like a 5 or 6% approval rating. And Trump said, "Oh, I don't know anything about that. That's not." And that's exactly what this plan is exactly what they intended to do. This unitary executive, which is another name for dictator. We're going to let forget about checks and balances and all the things. The founders, the founders. Let me approach this a somewhat different way. Winston Churchill said in 1947, democracy is the worst of all possible political systems, except for every other one anybody has ever thought of. And so we have to have democracy, but we need to do things to rein in its inherent dangers. And that was, of course, long after the founders of the United States, but they understood basically the same thing that any other form of government, if you want to have the people have rights, that rule has to come from the people. But there's the inherent danger of a demagogue arising, a tyrant arising, as we have been seeing with Trump, that you can get a misleader who can fool enough of the people enough of the time. Lincoln said you can't fool all the people all the time, and you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. But you don't have to. You only have to fool enough of them to be something about close to a majority of those who vote. So that's always a danger. And so the founders set up a system of checks and balances, divided power to try to protect against exactly what we're seeing now. But the unitary executive is to create either a monarch or a dictator, a leader, a Führer, who can do anything he wants, is above the law, can be utterly corrupt. And this is resulting in such terrible stuff already in the second Trump term that the people are overwhelmingly turned against it. If you look not just at polls, but how special elections have been turning out in the last year, they overwhelmingly turn against the Trump Republicans, and the midterm elections will see the Republicans wiped out if we have midterm elections that are fair. And that's why they are looking for every way they can to stop people from voting, stop mail-in voting, make it difficult for anybody to get there, send perhaps troops out to the polls to stop people. But if we have a free and fair election, there'll be a check on this already. And so I think what they are putting into effect is kind of a demonstration to the people of what living under this would be like. And um, I'm an optimist. I think it can destroy itself. Mhm. Well, what happened the last time he didn't like the results was January 6th, and that almost succeeded in ending the republic right there. Came very close to succeeding. We do have the advantage of knowing that that's what we're going to be looking at on a much larger scale. Um, but he and his people are now in control of the government. You would hope that the military would not obey orders to go against the American people. But when it comes to optimism, I've long said I'm a congenital optimist, all the evidence to the contrary notwithstanding. But more recently, I came across something that former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said about it. She said, I'm an optimist, but I worry a lot. I think that's where I am too. Yeah, go right ahead. Well, the most recent one, the most recent one that I wrote um, came out in 2022. It was titled from the Bob Dylan song, "The Times They Were Changing." I called this book "The Times They Were Changing" because it was about the time of 1964, 65, when basically we started to move much closer to the ideal of 1776 by opening them up to more people, by doing lots of things in terms of social programs with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and women's rights and all this sort of thing. And so the subtitle, "The Times They Were Changing," is 1964, by which I mean they call the long 1964 from the Kennedy assassination in late 63 into mid 1965, this time of extraordinary change culturally, politically, in all sorts of ways. And then the subtitle continues when the 60s, the so-called 60s, arrived and the battle lines of today were drawn. And I think we can see even more in the time, couple of years since that book came out, that the battle lines of today definitely were drawn then, because the first target of the Trump um, destruction is basically to destroy what was accomplished in the mid 60s. They want to go back much farther than that. But so I think that book has a lot to say to people. The times they were changing. I'd recommend it. Well, yeah, what what they want to go back to is basically something that goes against the American ideals. Um, they want to make America hate again. Not, of course, that America ever stopped hating completely, but they're promoting hate and division. Um, you mentioned the word patriot earlier. One of the things that really bothers me a great deal is that whenever you see a big American flag, you assume it's a Trump supporter. And these people are totally anti-American. They don't think so. They wouldn't, not only wouldn't admit it, they wouldn't believe it, but they are. They're going against the principles that were set forth in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. They complain about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but that's exactly what the opening of the Declaration of Independence is about. That this is a country of diversity, welcoming immigrants, including people, equality, which doesn't mean everybody winds up equal, but everybody has equal rights. They don't believe in any of that. So the people who are opposed to Trump I mean, I use an American flag, but feel a little bit leery of it because I think people will mistakenly think that means I'm a Trump supporter. But real patriots are the people who oppose this attempt to create a dictatorship in our republic. Well, I think what I was just talking about was the way the flag. Well, basically, the flag and the cross have both been stolen by people who oppose what they're supposed to stand for, and that's it's very unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Hmm.